seated. So this week I have found myself reflecting a lot on birthright. Obviously, we've heard this recently and for a little bit of time now in our national and cultural conversations. And in today's readings, particularly from Genesis, we hear once again about birthright. When we talk about birthright right now in our country and in our culture, it is often to decide who is in and who is out, who receives and who doesn't. So for the time that we share today, I'm going to invite us to sit with this wholly particular family that is Isaac, Rebekah, Jacob, and Esau. And I want us to reflect on birthright and our blindnesses around birthright, the blindness that we have to our true birthright. So let me set the stage just a little bit before we even get into this particular pericope from Genesis. If we go a few chapters ahead, we start this family saga with Abraham and Sarah, who are called by God to leave their families, their whole known universe behind, to go to this strange land where they will be granted a child, and that child will create a whole new people. And as human beings are quite often willing to do, we can trust God with like an asterisk and feel like we have to do some things to make sure God comes through on stuff. And so through some very interesting curves in the family story, Abraham's first child isn't with Sarah. It's with Hagar, the slave woman who dwelled as a part of their family. His first son was Ishmael. It's his second son, Isaac, though, who receives the birthright. And this is important for us to note before we go in. One, because the way that we enter into this story, if we're into this particular moment, if we're not aware of that history, we can assume that Isaac, the father of Jacob and Esau, was the firstborn. He wasn't. He was the second child of Abraham. So we already see here where God is doing something different in this family, upending and flipping on its head cultural understandings of birthright. Now let's talk about what birthright means in the ancient Near Eastern culture. Birthright is tied to the first male child born. And this particular child, their birthright, is to receive a double portion of their family's holdings. It's not that other male children coming after don't inherit. It's just that the first child gets double the land, double the wealth, double the authority over the family clan. That's important to note. We'll come back to that in a moment. What we also have to hold alongside this is in parallel to birthright, which is focused on the financial, economic, and kind of ruling authority over human beings. It's very human focused. We also have running alongside it the blessing. And we'll get to that a little bit more, but this blessing is the spiritual moral compass. It's the hopes and dreams of the patriarch, the father, for that child, for their life. And so we have birthright that's culturally understood goes to the first child, the first son, and a blessing that at the end of the father's life also is intended to go to the first son. So again, as you see, before we're even here, it's already been flipped on its head with Isaac, which makes what we experience in this particular passage all the more kind of hilarious and ironic to me. So we come into this space, and Isaac and Rebekah are awaiting their child to be born. And I first want to start with Rebekah and her blindness here. She's the first person that we meet in this passage. Now, this day and time in which Rebekah is pregnant, there were no ultrasounds, there was no OBGYNs to go in to figure out how many children am I having, and what's the sex, and how far along am I. She doesn't have any of that. Pregnancy for her and for so many women across the generations was an entrusting of themselves over to what God is doing, an entrusting of their bodies to a process in which creates life. And I'm drawn particularly to Rebecca's words when she feels this moving around, this wrestling going on in her belly. And she says, if this is what it's meant to be, why am I alive? Now, I don't think Rebecca is actually saying she doesn't want to be alive. What I think we're seeing here is the stress and the anxiety and the uncertainty of a young woman whose body is no longer her own, who is experiencing morning sickness and all sorts of pains. Her body is doing things it never used to do before. And this is something I've never experienced, obviously. And what I've heard from those who have gone through it is that it is a wrestling within one's own body. And when I hear this phrase, I hear Rebecca just venting a reactive emotion of her own pain and struggle with this wrestling that's going on inside of her. It's not a blindness that I'm inviting us to judge. Rather, it's an invitation to see the blindnesses that we naturally have in our world. Rebecca couldn't have known until the birth. She might have suspected, but she couldn't have known that she had 2 children in her, nor what would come about from that process. So sometimes, just like with Rebecca, our blindness is rooted to things that we just aren't even aware of. We don't even have the capacity to know. What we see here, though, is that in that space, the emotional reactivity is a space in which it reveals that blindness to us. And we'll come back to that phrase in a bit. But then we jump forward a little bit in this family's tale, and we get to the birth of the 2 children, Esau the firstborn and Jacob the second. And we have this interesting little segment where we hear about how Isaac loves Esau because he loves game, but Rebekah loves Jacob. Here we start to see Isaac's own blindness come about, a blindness that's rooted in the cultural assumptions that his firstborn son would gain the birthright, would gain the blessing, though in his own lived experience that wasn't the case. And yet here is a cultural assumption that this is the child to cherish, this is the son to nurture and to pour love into. And the consequence of that is blindness towards Jacob. Though there is love there, I am sure, though I'm sure there was tenderness and warmth, our scriptures really do reveal where there is a difference in how Isaac related to his 2 sons. So the blindness of a human cultural assumption about who inherits and who doesn't leads him to be blind to one of his own children. And this blindness continues on for Isaac. If we jump ahead to chapter 27 in the book of Genesis, Isaac is now old, and he has lost his physical sight as well. It's not a spiritual blindness only, it is a physical blindness. And as he nears the end of his life, he invites Esau to go out, kill a piece of game for him, bring it back, and feed him, and he'll offer his blessing. And Jacob and his mother Rebekah hear this, and while Esau's out doing that thing, Rebekah and Jacob concoct this scenario. Well, we'll pick a good, nice lamb from your father's herds. You will prepare it, and you will go, and you will receive the blessing, Jacob. Even then, at his old age, having lived so many years with his children, to not have his physical sight, and yet to still be blind to the voice of his child, blind to the touch of his child. I wonder how we have experienced such blindnesses in our own life, how we have been blinded by human cultural assumptions, and how that's shifted our relationships. And then we arrive to Esau. Esau, the firstborn, who is supposed to inherit this double portion of his family's property and wealth. And he comes in one day from working out in the fields, and he's famished. He's hungry. And this is where we see emotional reactivity coming out again. Again, let me be clear. I'm not putting judgment on the emotional reactivity. Our emotions are emotions. And when we allow our emotions to rule how we act, that is what I mean by our reactivity. So here comes Esau in, and I'm just seeing and experiencing him as hangry. I know I have experienced this. I'm sure some of you all have, where you're just so hungry, you don't think about what you're saying or doing. Your mind is just focused on, I need food now. If you don't believe me in that, talk to Dominique next time you see him. He sees it quite a lot with me. And this is where Esau's blindness is revealed. That desire for food in that moment convinces him to trade something of great value for a loaf of bread and a bowl of lentil soup. He trades this birthright, the station in the family, the wealth, the possessions, all of it. He trades it away like that for a bowl of soup. Even his phrase, I'm about dead, why would it matter? Give it to me. And we end our pericope this morning, thus Esau despised his birthright. In his desire for a short-term benefit, for a short-term gain, he lets go of a birthright that would have been a blessing for his entire life. I wonder how we have experienced such blindnesses in our life, and even today, where for a desire for a short-term gain or for an immediate solution, we have traded away something greater, more profound, of more value. For me, just when I think about the way that we approach as a human society now the care of our creation, seems to be an apt example. Then we get to Jacob, good old Jacob, the second born, and here his blindness is being revealed. Here his brother comes and he's hungry, and where the cultural standard of the time is you don't barter things for that food and drink when someone comes asking for it, you offer it. This is something that his grandfather Abraham did when angels came to visit Abraham, and Sarah offered the choicest foods for a meal without any question of payment. But here's Jacob, and he sees Esau in this moment of vulnerability and uses it to trick him to offer him his birthright. Now, we could look at his blindness a couple ways. One way we could interpret this blindness is a blindness of greed. He knows he's going to inherit something, but this desire, this hunger for more of that birthright, more of that blessing, we can see that as a blindness. There's a blindness here that I think we can interpret with Isaac, that there's not enough of that to go around. And while that element is here, I don't think greed is the main blindness here, the main motivator for Jacob. Because if we dig deeper down, I think it goes back to a scarcity of love that he has felt from his father, within his family system. Imagine Jacob's existence growing up into this household where he knew his father cared and yet saw this favoritism shown. Does that not stir up in individuals, in ourselves, feelings of inadequacy? Am I not worthy of love? Am I not worthy? Am I not enough? Here, while it's on the surface level a tempting and a tricking for a birthright, underneath it is the blindness of a fear that there is not enough love to go around, that there is scarcity in the world. And it's all the more striking knowing that as these two brothers grow into men, when we read later on in Genesis, they both inherit wealth. They both are profound leaders in their families. there was more than enough to share. And there's more than enough love to be given. Perhaps Jacob's blindness and the reactivity he has toward Esau to counteract cultural norms of hospitality was rooted maybe not in greed, but in a desire to be seen, to be affirmed. And I wonder how many of us have experienced that own blindness in our families or in our communities, our churches. So what does this all mean for us? For me, I hear the good news when I look at this family. For this is not just a particular family of significance. It's a family that reflects all of us. Are not our families just as messy and human and befuddled? Don't we each have our own blindnesses to each other and to the world around us? And do we not cause harm to others, even as we have been harmed ourselves? Here, the good news, the gospel I hear in this holy family is to see where we are all human. We are all imperfect. And when we try and put ourselves into these categories of victim and victimizer, it draws us to see the truth that it's a mixture of both in each of us. For we all have blindnesses. We all have places where we are fearful and uncertain, where we get blinded by our cultural tales and nuances, or just our lack of having knowledge. And when I think about this particular moment in our culture, in our nation, and in our world, when so much about birthright, whether it's about land or who inherits society, we're seeing and revealing, or it is revealed to us here, that those are human understandings of birthright. There is a deeper gift that we are offered. God reveals through this holy family that each of us are uniquely loved and uniquely seen in our diversity, in our gifts, our talents, our abilities. God's love is not limited. God's love is not scarce. It is an abundance of it. God comes in the midst of our messiness and loves us into wholeness, invites us to take on a new perspective in the world. How might this passage be an invitation for us? For instance, when we notice emotions coming up to us and we want to react in the moment, or we come up against cultural norms that society says this is how things are done, when we come up on them, our reaction is just to do it. Perhaps this is an invitation to pause, to be still for a moment and reflect on what is it that we are experiencing here? What am I feeling and what's that rooted in? That 5 to 10 seconds of a pause can radically transform how we view ourselves and the world around us. It gives us enough time to shift from a mindset of scarcity to a mindset of generosity. And in a world when we right now are so caught up with saying birthright is about who's in and who's out, the good news is that for all of us, no matter what faith we come from, no matter what culture we were born into, no matter what our family dynamics and composition looks like, we are all inheritors of God's kingdom. We are inheritors of God's love and God's blessing. And that is never stripped away. So here's your homework for the week. I want you to take your bulletin insert with you that has the reading. And I want you to find 5 minutes each day, wherever you want to do it, brushing your teeth before you go to bed, maybe over lunch. But I want you to read over that passage in Genesis every day this week. And notice what draws your attention. Notice where God is inviting you to sit with a particular blindness you might be wrestling with. And I'll be curious in the coming days and weeks to hear how God is opening us up, all of us, to love and to abundance, to a true claiming of the birthright that we are all inheritors of, God's kingdom and God's love. Amen.